The year is 1545. The age of exploration is in full swing, and Spanish galleons rule the waves, charting unknown territories across the globe. But some discoveries were never meant to be found. Our story begins in the Eastern Pacific, where a Spanish merchant vessel named La Esperanza, the Hope, sailed with a crew of 32 men. They were bound for the Philippines, carrying supplies, weapons, and dreams of fortune. But fate had other plans. Captain Rodrigo de Santana stood at the helm as dark clouds gathered on the horizon. His crew had sailed these waters before, but something felt different this time. The air was thick, oppressive. The wind carried a strange, metallic scent. "Storm approaching! Capitan!" shouted the first mate, Diego Hernandez, his voice barely audible over the growing roar of the sea. Within hours, they were engulfed. Not just any storm. A tempest unlike anything the seasoned sailors had ever witnessed. Waves towered like mountains. Lightning fractured the sky. For 3 days and 3 nights, La Esperanza was tossed like a toy across the merciless ocean. Men lashed themselves to the masts. Others bailed water desperately from below deck. The ship's priest, Father Miguel, clutched his rosary and prayed for deliverance. But the storm showed no mercy. On the 4th morning, silence. The survivors emerged onto the deck, their clothes tattered, their faces hollow with exhaustion. The storm had passed, but they had no idea where they were. The ship's navigation equipment was destroyed. Their maps were soaked and illegible. And worst of all, they were taking on water. Badly. "Land!" A voice cried out from the crow's nest. "Land ahead!" Through the morning mist, an island emerged. Lush, green, mountainous. It seemed like salvation. Captain Santana ordered the crew to make for shore before La Esperanza sank beneath them. As they approached, something felt wrong. The beach was pristine, too pristine. No bird circled overhead. No sound of wildlife echoed from the dense jungle beyond. Just silence. 27 men had survived the storm. 5 had been lost to the sea. They dragged themselves onto beach, grateful to feel solid ground beneath their feet. But their relief was short-lived. "Dios mío," whispered Diego, staring at the sand near the tree line. There, pressed deep into the earth, was a footprint. But this was no ordinary footprint. It was massive, easily 4 feet long, with 5 distinct toe impressions, each as wide as a man's fist. Captain Santana knelt beside it, his hand trembling as he measured. "This is impossible," he muttered. "No creature walks the earth this size." The crew gathered around, their faces pale. Some made the sign of the cross. Others gripped their weapons tighter. Father Miguel began to pray again, his voice shaking. "We need water and supplies," Captain Santana announced. "Try to maintain control. The ship won't sail without repairs. We'll split into groups. Diego, take 10 men and search for fresh water. 1, you and 8 others will gather wood for repairs. The rest stay with the ship. And everyone stays armed and alert." As the search parties ventured into the jungle, they found more signs. Many more. Enormous footprints formed trails through the undergrowth. Trees were snapped at heights of 15, 20 feet, broken like twigs. And then they found the structures. Hidden deep in the jungle, half covered by centuries of vegetation, stood massive stone pillars. They were arranged in circles, each stone easily 20 feet tall and carved with strange symbols that none of the Spaniards could recognize. This was no natural formation. Someone or something had built this. "Who could move stones this size?" asked a young sailor named Carlos, his voice barely a whisper. Diego ran his hand along one of the carvings. The symbols depicted humanoid figures, but they were enormous compared to the smaller human figures shown fleeing from them. His blood ran cold. "We need to return to the ship. Now." But it was already too late. At first, they thought it was thunder, but the sky was clear. The sound came again, a deep, resonating boom that seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet. And again, rhythmic, purposeful, footsteps. "Run!" Diego screamed. The men crashed through the jungle, branches tearing at their faces, roots threatening to trip them with every step. The booming sounds grew closer, accompanied now by a new sound, A deep, guttural breathing, like wind through a cavern. Behind them, trees exploded. Something massive was moving through the jungle, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Carlos glanced back and immediately wished he hadn't. Through the canopy, he caught a glimpse, a silhouette against the setting sun. A humanoid shape, but impossibly tall. 20 feet? 25? Its arms were long, muscular, its head covered in wild, dark hair. And its eyes glowed with an ancient, primal hunger. Carlos stumbled, fell, scrambled back to his feet. His companions were ahead, their terrified screams echoing through the jungle. The booming footsteps were right behind him now. He could feel the ground shaking with each impact. And then a massive hand closed around his waist. The others didn't stop. They couldn't. Terror drove them forward, back toward the beach, toward whatever safety the damaged ship might provide. Diego burst onto the sand, gasping for air. "Get everyone on the ship. Now!" Captain Santana saw the panic in his first mate's eyes. "What happened? Where's the rest of your party?" "Giants!" Diego shouted, his voice cracking. "There are giants on this island. They took Carlos. We have to leave." The captain stared at him, disbelief written across his face. But before he could respond, another boom echoed from the jungle. Then another. Multiple sources. Multiple creatures. "Everyone aboard. Cut the anchors. Push us off." The crew scrambled. Some pushed against the hull, trying to dislodge the ship from the sand. Others climbed the rigging, preparing what remained of their sails. Father Miguel stood at the bow, his cross held high, praying louder than ever. The first creature emerged from the tree line. Even battle-hardened sailors froze at the sight. It stood at least 25 feet tall, its body covered in matted hair and old scars. Its face was brutally human, nose, mouth, eyes, but distorted, savage, wrong. It wore crude skins as clothing, and in one massive hand, it carried Carlos, what was left of him. The creature held the sailor's body like a child might hold a doll. But Carlos was no longer screaming. He hung limply, his body twisted at impossible angles, clothes torn and stained with blood. The giant raised Carlos to its mouth. "Push! Push the ship!" Captain Santana screamed. The crew needed no further motivation. They threw themselves against the hull, with superhuman strength born of pure terror. The ship began to move, sliding slowly back toward the water. The giant took a bite. Men vomited. Others wept. But they didn't stop pushing. The ship was moving faster now, the waves beginning to catch it, and then the others emerged. 3 more giants stepped from the jungle, each as massive as the first. One was female, her hair longer, her features slightly softer but no less terrifying. 2 appeared younger, perhaps offspring, but still towering 15 to 18 feet tall. They saw the ship. They saw the prey. Escaping. They charged. The giants crashed into the surf, water exploding around their massive legs. They moved with horrifying speed for creatures so large, their long arms reaching out toward the ship. "Sail! Get those sails up!" Diego commanded. The wind caught the torn canvas. The ship lurched forward, but the giants were in the water now, wading deeper, their massive hands grasping at the stern. One giant caught the rudder. Its fingers wrapped around the wood, and with a sickening crack, it tore the entire rudder free from the ship. The ship spun wildly, nearly capsizing. Men clung to whatever they could find. Captain Santana grabbed the wheel, fighting to maintain any control without a rudder, but the current was pulling them out. The waves were carrying them away from the island. The giants waded deeper, but even they had limits. The water rose to their chests, then their necks. Finally, they could go no further. The largest one, the first to emerge from the jungle, stood there in the deep water, still holding what remained of Carlos. It threw its head back and released a sound that would haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. It wasn't quite a roar. It wasn't quite a scream. It was something in between, a sound of rage, of frustration, of hunger denied. The other giants joined in, their voices creating a chorus of nightmarish proportions. And then, As the ship drifted further into the open ocean, the giants did something that chilled the survivors even more than the chase. They began to feed. The crew watched in horror as the creatures gathered around their kill, tearing flesh from bone with practiced ease. This wasn't the first time they had hunted humans. Their movements were too efficient, too familiar. This was routine for them. "How many did we lose?" Captain Santana asked quietly, his eyes still fixed on the island. Diego counted. Carlos for certain. Juan's group never returned from the wood-gathering mission. "That's 9 men, Capitan. 9 men gone. 18 survivors. Half their crew lost in a single day." As night fell, the island remained visible on the horizon. They were drifting, unable to steer without a rudder, but at least they were moving away. The crew huddled together on deck, no one willing to go below, everyone keeping watch on that cursed shoreline. Father Miguel moved among them, offered what comfort he could, but his hands shook and his voice wavered. Even his faith had been shaken by what they had witnessed. "Did you see how they moved?" whispered a sailor named Marco. "How fast they were. They're used to hunting. We weren't the first." Diego nodded grimly. "Those stone structures we found, they're not ruins. They're active. This is their territory. Their hunting ground." "But giants," another sailor protested. "Giants are myths. Children's stories." "We all saw them," Diego replied. "Myths don't tear rudders off ships. Myths don't." He couldn't finish. The image of Carlos being devoured was seared into his mind. The night brought new horrors. Though they had drifted out of sight of the island, sounds carried across the water, distant booms, crashes, and worst of all, screams. "Juan's group," Captain Santana said quietly. "They're still hunting them." The screams continued for hours, echoing across the dark water like ghosts. Each one sent shivers through the crew. Each one reminded them how close they had come to the same fate. Some men covered their ears and prayed. Others simply stared into the darkness, their minds broken by the day's events. By morning, the sounds had stopped. The island was barely visible now, just a dark smudge on the horizon. But even that distance didn't feel like enough. "We need to repair what we can," Captain Santana announced. "Without a rudder, we're at the mercy of the currents. We'll use oars to steer as best we can, but we need to fashion something to replace what was taken." The crew set to work with grim determination. They tore apart interior walls, repurposed cargo crates, anything to create a makeshift rudder. It wouldn't be as good as the original, but it might keep them from drifting in circles. Diego supervised the repairs while Captain Santana studied what remained of their maps. "We're somewhere east of the Philippines," he muttered. "But exactly where I cannot say. That storm pushed us far off course."